So you can go online and read all the detailed bios. We're going to try and do a speed round of introductions. And we'll just start on the far side. Lanny, why don't you take a minute or two, introduce yourself to the crowd, and then we'll just come on down. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, I'm Lanny Kaufer. I live in Ojai right now with my wife, Rondia. Raise your hand there, Rondia. All right. But actually, I just want to give a shout out to the UCSB Social Club, because I think I'm part of the history of the UCSB Social Club, because I went to UCSB and I had the first psychedelic radio station on KCSB in 1965. And I don't know, maybe some of you here were in your dorm rooms then getting high and listening to my show. Anyway, since then, I've been working and studying plant medicine, medicinal herbs, edible plants, and I've been leading what I call herb walks since 1976 in Ojai, Santa Barbara, Ventura, and around this area, a little bit in LA. So I recently wrote a book in 2020 called Medicinal Herbs of California.
Where can I get that book, Lanny?
Actually, you can get it in the Tiki room,
right
over there where the UCSB Social Club is. Right after this panel. I'll be over there for about 15 or 20 minutes. If you want to get a book and have it signed, I'll be there. And I'll probably be able to share a little bit more as we go through the panel. So thanks for having me here today.
Thanks, Lanny. Thanks for coming. Amanda?
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Dr. Amanda Reiman. I am a social ethnobotanist, and I've been studying the relationship between psychoactive plants, people, and society for over 20 years. I'm down here from Mendocino County in the famed Emerald Triangle. And I actually got my start with Students for Sensible Drug Policy at UC Berkeley. So also really a big fan of student-run organizations trying to change the world. I have two companies that focus on the sustainability of psychoactive plants and also mindful consumption. So I'm a harm reductionist, and I like to focus on reducing the harms and maximizing the benefits that come from growing psychedelic plants and consuming psychedelic plants. So it's a real honor to be here today, and I can't wait for the discussion.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bob.
Hey, everybody. I'm Bob Johnson. I'm the founder of Custom Capsule Consultants. We're a supplement manufacturer that makes all sorts of different plant-based type medicine, and also the founder of MycroBoost. We have a functional mushroom company in there with gummies, coffee, and soft gel supplements. Back in 2008, I got my career started in the cannabis industry with a brand we called, I Can't Believe It's Pot Butter. And at the time, it wasn't fully legal in California yet, but recreational or was first on the ballot in 2010. And so my partners and I, being edibles manufacturers, we thought we wanted to get ahead of the regulations because California bureaucrats like to write laws about stuff that they don't understand. And so we started a trade association called the California Association for the Production of Safe Cannabis Edibles, or CAPSCI. And anyways, when you would go into a dispensary back in 2008, 2009, you look at the brownie on the counter and it would say it's 10 skull and crossbones. Or the drink would be 5x strength. Don't really explain what X is though. And so we wanted to have some truth in labeling on all the edibles. And also, too, when you're trying to sell an edible to a dispensary, they'll have like the biggest guy in the corner, right? And they'll say, yeah, so if Mikey gets high from your brownie, then we'll buy from you. Otherwise, it's not going to be good enough. And I wanted something that was a little more objective than Mikey's opinion. And so we started this association. We brought all the biggest edibles manufacturers in the state together. And now that's why, your gummies say 10 milligrams of Delta-9 THC rather than, triple good luck.
Excellent. So I can imagine we're going to see some parallels with psychedelics that are in what I hear is the gray market. And sometimes you see little mushrooms on the package, and if there's like too many mushrooms, you're in trouble. Just take one. So, we'll just go ahead and jump into it. We're going to keep it very interactive. It's going to be a conversation. Lots of wisdom and experience up here. And why don't we start with you, Bob, and we'll go the other way. And I was kind of wondering, what's the one thing you want folks to leave with today? If they remember one thing from our conversation, what's the one thing you'd like them to remember? It can be, Anything that you think is worthy to take home and maybe share with a friend?
I mean, I love groups like this because everybody is so loving, and I think what draws people to mushrooms and psychedelics is they help you love yourself. At least for me, the more that I microdose, and the more that I feel like I accept who I am and all my flaws, and everybody that I meet at these events too. There's no small talk in mushrooms.
No.
I was at an event the other day, and we were serving our functional mushroom gummies, and the guy walked up and he said, "Hey, I'm bipolar." And I said, "Hey, I'm Bob." But get right into it, and I've just seen a lot of transformation. People brought to tears just talking about how it's helped them and help them love themselves more.
Great, thank you. How about you, Amanda?
Well, I think there's two things. One is that the history of plant medicine far outweighs its history as a dangerous illegal narcotic. And a lot of us were born during Prohibition. So we've been raised to think of plant medicines, of psychoactive plant medicines as dangerous illicit narcotics. But that's only been around since really the 1970s when the Controlled Substances Act was passed. It has a thousands of year history as a therapeutic product. And so I see this as an opportunity to return it back to where it has been for ages and ages, and to get over what we did for this very short, very misguided period of time under Prohibition. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a bit more practical advice. We like to say in cannabis edibles, I'm sure you know, start low, go slow. You can always eat more, but you can't eat less.
That's two things, and those are both good. So, Lanny?
Yeah, so I guess I'd like to emphasize the fact that we humans have been evolving for, let's say, millions of years, eating plants. That's what we do. That's what our bodies are designed to do. And so we've been using plant medicine all that time, because food is medicine too. And these special medicines that we're talking about here today, these psychoactive medicines, they fall right into that same category. They're all substances, natural substances like foods that our bodies are designed to assimilate. And if we can find alternatives to synthetic drugs that are made from petrochemicals and products of mining, etc., in laboratories, and return to what our bodies are used to, then I think we'll all be healthier.
That's great. You just stole the answer to my next question, which what plants and herbs are medicine? And it sounds like a lot of them. Some can obviously be toxic or poisonous, but you're going with most are. What's your favorite plant or herb medicine? Yeah, I know. And remember, you might have been participating in this before it was legal in some jurisdictions, but you're good.
Okay, but it's legal for me to talk about it.
Yeah,
now?
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've been using plant medicine of all kinds for many years, as I said, but I guess for this audience, I have to give a shout out to peyote.
Oh, beautiful.
That is my mind and life enhancing medicine of choice.
Yeah.
And well,
Means a lot to you, right?
yeah, I don't know quite where to go with that,
Yeah.
except to say that I've seen it described in a chart of all different medicinal herbs in the world and all their properties, and in every category, it comes out as being a tonic or beneficial to every system of the body, except for a couple of them, which, like, it does sometimes cause nausea, so not so much for the digestive system.
Sure,
But,
sure.
in terms of all the scope of medicinal herbs, it's definitely one of the most powerful.
So it sounds like one of your best friend plants is peyote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amanda, what about you?
Oh, I've always been a cannabis girl.
Yeah.
We have endocannabinoid systems. All of our endocannabinoid systems operate differently. There's a lot of theories about endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome, and that some of the diseases that we see most benefited from cannabis could be because our ECS just doesn't work properly. Ever since I first used cannabis, it just felt like a match. It felt like I was giving my body something it wasn't able to give itself. And even though my relationship with cannabis has evolved a lot since I was 19, it's always been a big part of my life. And I know that it will continue to be a big part of my life. And it's also so accessible. It's one of those plants that a lot of people can find benefit from. There are downsides, like there's downsides to everything, but they're very easily managed. And so I see cannabis as being an amazing opportunity to move people off of pharmaceutical drugs that are causing more harm than good.
Yeah.
And for people of all ages, which is another thing that I think is really fantastic about cannabis. We see it help very young children, all the way to very, very old people, people at end of life, people in functional ways. And it's no wonder that it's the oldest cultivated plant known to humankind. I mean, as soon as we found cannabis, we're like, all right, if we have to move, the plant's coming with us. And that's been from the very, very, very beginning.
Yeah.
So it's really played such a role in how we've evolved as people.
Excellent. All right, Bob.
Yeah, y'all took two of my favorites there, but
Running out. We got lots left.
I love mushrooms. I love mushrooms
Stole mine.
on my pizza. I'll eat mushroom jerky, mushroom coffee, available from MycroBoost in the back corner there. Cordyceps is probably my favorite of all the functional mushrooms. It's having a moment right now with the HBO zombie mushroom show. But there's hundreds of different types of cordyceps. We don't serve the zombie flavor at our booth. But it's great for your respiratory system. It's a great natural source of energy. In fact, it's such a difficult mushroom to grow. The street value of it is higher than psychedelic mushrooms now. It's like these spindly little orange ET finger looking things. It's just super cool. Mushrooms are maybe our creators and just fascinating.
So maybe we'll share a few data points with the audience because I'm always curious. I like to get actual real-world data. When you say that those mushrooms are more expensive than, say, the ones that produce psilocybin and psilocy, what would a pound of, say, magic mushrooms go for if you were to know where to buy them in some jurisdiction versus, say, the ones that the cordyceps?
Well, for the savvy buyer, you're actually measuring the amount of actives in the mushroom. The street value of mushrooms that are just going based on price is anywhere from $400 to $800, depending on where you are. But there's some really exotic type of mushrooms like Enigma or pink rhino that have 2, 3, sometimes 4 times as much tryptamines in them as your average golden teacher or something like that. And those can go for a couple $1,000s, but still would be usually more value with just measuring the amount of tryptamines.
Well, it's great that you brought up active ingredients. That's one of the things that people, if we start getting into the cannabis conversation and THC inflation and potency inflation and what you see in the stores versus what actually is in the flower versus what's on the label. So when we start talking about scale and staying in harmony with nature, and there's certain compounds and molecules that we might want to use for medicine, maybe we can all think a little bit about what are the best sources for these. And I think if you asked enough people, you would get different answers from just about everybody, depending on where they are in that conversation. So, Amanda, when you think about certain compounds or molecules, what's your source of choice?
The sun. So I'm a big fan of things grown outdoors. I understand that from a scientific perspective, sometimes you have to control every single thing about the environment except for one factor in order to have a purely scientific experience. I think that growing medicine is very different than growing therapeutic plant products. Mm-hmm. But from a cannabis perspective, I'm all about the sun-grown. So, the research study just came out that showed that there's a more varied and intense terpene profile with sun-grown cannabis versus cannabis grown indoors. We know that terpenes, or the smells that are in the cannabis plant, are a very important part of the experience and the therapeutic benefit. And we also know that the plant, when it's a little bit stressed, is going to produce even more terpenes, even more varied cannabinoids. We have the entourage effect with cannabis. So if you think about a symphony and just hearing the violinist versus hearing the entire symphony, it's a difference, right? When you have that whole symphony, it's something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And for me, trying to find a cannabis plant that has varied cannabinoid content, not just THC, that has intense and varied terpene content, is really going to give you the most beneficial experience. And we've got very strange things happening in the cannabis market where people seem to think that cannabis grown indoors with a light this close to it with 30% THC is fire. It's what you're looking for. Let me tell you something. Ask for sun-grown. I went to a local dispensary yesterday because whenever I'm in a new place, I like to go to the local dispensary and see what's there. And I asked, what do you have here that's grown outdoors? They had one thing, Carlos Santana's brand. And it was about half the price of the indoor product. And it was beautiful. It's Durban's Poison, one of my favorite cultivars. It had a beautiful nose on it. So we are in a place with cannabis where we have to mature as consumers, and we have to understand and think about how do we buy our food. What food are we looking for? Are we looking for the organic, locally produced, craft, unique produce? Or are we looking for the mass-produced, industrialized agriculture, artificially red apple, artificially big apple? We know the answer, so we just have to apply that same logic to our cannabis products, because at the end of the day, it's about sustainability. Yeah. And growing cannabis outdoors is infinitely more sustainable as a practice than growing it artificially between four concrete walls.
Great. Lanny? You'll probably second that, but let's talk about some of your best sources for compounds.
Well, so I just want to comment on what you mentioned about the entourage effect, because that is a terminology that we've gained from the cannabis culture, and it's a great concept because that's what you get when you eat whole foods or when you use a whole herb and not just the so-called active ingredient. And, you know, science is great. I'm all about pure science, but science can also be used by moneyed interests to promote certain things and used in certain ways. So the whole notion of extracting the one active ingredient out of something and packaging that and selling that, to me, I prefer the whole product. The fresh herb that you go out and you find and you pick yourself or you grow in your yard. So definitely outdoor growing. You mentioned terpenes. Well, plants produce terpenes, which are they're basically the ingredients of essential oils. So that's what gives plants their aromas. And they have various other compounds that are there mostly protectively to protect them from plant bacteria, to protect them from plant viruses, to protect the plants from plant fungi that can infect them. And humans have learned to take those same compounds and harness them. Turns out we can use them, that the terpenes are antibacterial, for example. The same terpenes that are found in cannabis are found throughout the world of nature. There's this whole group of terpenes that you can find everywhere in the plants, and they just each has their own unique profile of terpenes that gives it its unique aroma. And you get that from going outside into nature and where plants are growing in their environment and responding to their environment under the sun. So maybe I'm just seconding what you said, but
so Lanny, it's great to do the sun growing in the outdoor, but what about scale? How do we get, and if there's a limited supply of a certain plant or herb in nature, how do we make sure that we don't destroy its population or ecosystem?
Okay, well that's a very important point, and I do address that a lot in my book. One of the factors.
Where can I get your book, Lanny?
What?
Where can I get your book?
Oh yeah, you know what? I have them. They're going to be in the with the UCSB Psychedelic Club over there.
I'll see you over there for a signature.
Yeah. So I had to go through a whole process of figuring out which plants to put in the book because the publisher wanted a book for the whole state of California. So I started with 200 plants that I knew were medicinal, and I got it down to 70, which is what they wanted. And one of the criteria was, is it sustainable to send people out into nature looking for these plants and picking them? And even if they do, let's make sure that they know what sustainable foraging looks like, how you approach a plant population, that you don't just pick the first specimen you see. You stop, you give thanks to that plant, whatever way works for you, whatever your spiritual framework is. And then you look around and say, is this the only one? Or if it is, I'm going to go find where there's a lot of these growing so that you're not impacting the population.
I follow that practice in El Segundo. When I see rosemary in all the yards, I just grab a little bit and it seems to do okay.
Yeah, a little bit here and a little bit there.
Yeah.
It works fine.
Bob, can we talk about some of your perspective, since you're looking at sourcing different materials, sometimes entourage, sometimes isolates for different formulations?
Yeah, synthetic can be kind of a scary word to a bunch of hippies and plant medicine.
Synthetic.
But in some cases, like with peyote and mescaline, mushrooms can grow really easily. They grow everywhere. They can grow in 3-4 weeks. But the San Pedro cactus, takes years, decades to fully mature. And if it were to be legalized, we'd probably go through it all by the end of the weekend. Same thing with 5-MeO DMT. You can get that from licking a frog, but even though the frog's probably not harmed in it, it's just, I think it's not consensual.
Yeah, definitely didn't get consent.
And so, yeah, those are things that I think will be more accepted maybe as a synthetic alternative. But also with synthetic psilocybin, the thing that I like about it is it's just predictability. Same thing that we were talking about with measuring in cannabis. Mushrooms, even when you have like a bin of all of the same strain, a mushroom on this end of the bin or the other end of the bin can have different amounts of actives. So when you get to the point where you really want to be able to predict your dose, or you find the dose that's just perfect for you, then it's really easy to return there. It's a faster onset. It doesn't last as long, not the full 8-hour magic carpet ride. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but I just suggest that people use whatever they're comfortable with.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, please.
Yeah.
Please.
No, and I agree with the whole idea of standardizing doses. I mean, that's the safe way to go. But just one point, as far as, yes, peyote is extremely limited growing area. It's under threat. So while I'm for decriminalizing nature, I'm for legalizing all plants. All plants. I don't think that we should allow any more harvesting of peyote. It should be there for the Native American church and Native American people. But it can be grown. But as you were saying, it's a very long life cycle for peyote. Now, San Pedro, or Wachuma, as it's known, that grows pretty fast. I mean, I have a bunch of them in my yard, and they grow fast. So I think for mescaline, as mescaline supply, I think we should be looking at San Pedro.
Yeah, so alternative sources. So peyote is a great conversation point because obviously ecology issues and protecting the ecology and the environment. There's a lot of folks, including the ones that are focused on decrim nature. And if you're not familiar with it, you can jump online and look at decrim nature, and you'll also see a schism in the pro-psychedelics community among indigenous and tribal populations, Native American church, some of the things that Lanny was referencing, and people that think that all plants should be free for everybody to use all the time. And if there's a limited supply and these plants grow slowly and they're used in a sacred ceremonial environment, it's part of the culture and the medicine for that population of people, that it may be distressed or not have access to other means. How do we protect that? How do we balance that? So having access to synthetic mescaline would be one potential alternative. And then the fact that there's another cacti known as Wachuma or San Pedro that also produces mescaline, not quite as potent as what I've experienced or heard. But having alternative sources to all these things is part of the conversation. So scale's really important. So one thing to talk about, since a lot of folks here may not be doing it today, is how to integrate herbal medicine and plant medicine into your daily life. Just some examples or some ideas about how to make it part of your daily routine.
Well, there's a subscription on MycroBoost.com. You can you just have to sign up once, and we send the functional mushrooms right to your door. Personally, I take lion's mane and cordyceps daily, and smoke cannabis daily. The mushroom coffee is a great alternative to sucking down the Starbucks. The energy from cordyceps and lion's mane helps for productivity, focus, and it's pretty delicious too.
Great. Amanda, how about you?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to say something really quickly
Sure.
about the scale, because I could talk a lot about harm reduction, and I think in this particular case, it's not just harm reduction for us; it's harm reduction from us. As a society, we suck at moderation. We are terrible at it, and when we find something we like, we just want it all the time, as much as we can possibly put inside ourselves, to our detriment. And so I think we're not just protecting ourselves from our own consumption, we're protecting the environment from our own consumption. And we're protecting, indigenous communities who rely on these medicines from us and our sudden interest in all of these things that they've been knowing and using for a very long time. So I think that's really important. When it comes to integrating it into your life, it's all so personal and so intentional. So my advice would be, do not listen to anyone and how they incorporate plant medicines into their lives, because that's for them. So it's really just about you and what's best for you. And, some people consume cannabis every day. Other people cannot do that and have a functional, happy time. Some people take a little bit of psilocybin and that is too much. And other people can down 4 grams and they're just off and running. So don't rely on what other people have told you. Well, this is what I do. This is what works for me. It's about what works for you. So really my advice is to journal. There's a million apps out there that you can use and journals that you can get where you're keeping track of your experience, and figuring out what works best for you, what is going to maximize the benefit and reduce the harm. That's what you're always trying to look for, right? What is the routine that's going to give me everything I want out of this while minimizing the negative effects? And so it's about finding that balance. And if there's coffee drinkers out there, you've already figured this out, right? So you know how much coffee you can have to give you what you need without so much that it's really disrupting your life. You know what happens if you don't have your coffee and how to manage that whole situation. Like there's a super long line at the airport for coffee and you just aren't able to get in that line. What do you do next? I mean, we're all used to managing how psychoactive plants interact with our day so that we can go about getting what we need out of them. And these plants are no different. Use of these plants is not frivolous. It is fun, but it's not frivolous. It should be intentional. It should be mindful. And that's really the best way, I think, to develop a daily practice that's going to give you what you want out of your relationship with the plants.
Yep. Great. Thank you so much. I know
You're a hard act to follow.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lanny. Come on. You might have a few ideas on how to use the herbs you've been harvesting for 30 years.
I'm not on this panel as a representative of cannabis or psilocybin. I'm here more in the overall topic of plant medicine, of medicinal herbs. So I would say, to incorporate plant medicine into your life, basically follow your nose. Find what smells good to you. Find what tastes good to you. What herbs, what plants, and get to know them. Find one that people, say has some properties. Start learning about it and trying it. Start with one plant. Of course, my first recommendation would be go to herbwalks.com and sign up for one of my herb walks and go out into nature and meet some plants and feel them and smell them and get to know about the terpenes and these things. But generally, I'm just saying, find a plant, and you're eating plants every day in some form, probably more than you realize, and find a taste or a smell that really appeals to you and get to know that and just start with that and find out what properties it has, other ways you can prepare it and ingest it to get the benefits from it.
Thank you so much. Nature walk with Lanny, pulling up some herbs. That sounds like a nice day.
Pulling up herbs, but sampling herbs.
Well, we'll be foraging, right?
Yeah, but not pulling them up out of the ground.
I'm going to take it home and plant it in my... Okay. So let's shift into what you can and can't do out there. I think it's not the funnest subject. Is there any Johnny Law here in the crowd? Any? Okay. So, law enforcement's important. Regulations and rules help society function, sometimes dysfunction. But maybe we can just all talk a little bit for a minute or bounce around on when people hear decriminalize, a lot of times they think it means legal, and that's not the case. It's a misnomer. And then, you've got federally legal versus state legality. You've got the ability to purchase something, but you can't grow it. You can grow it, but you can't make a product. It's kind of crazy town. So for a lot of the folks in the audience that are new to the psychedelic conversation and they know things happen at festivals and they seem to be able to access things, why decrim nature? Why is that even happening? And then what does legalization mean? Either one of you want to step in? You got the policy.
All right, I'll
side.
go.
Yeah.
All right, so just a really brief 101. So decriminalization is basically removing the criminal penalties associated with personal possession and use. It does not create a regulated market. It does not create licensing for cultivation or manufacturing or retail. It basically says if you get caught with a certain amount of a substance and it's for personal use, it's not a crime, right? It could be a ticket, right? So if you have it in the wrong place, it could be a financial penalty, but it's not going to be a crime. Cannabis was actually decriminalized in California for decades before legalization happened. You could possess up to an ounce of cannabis, and if you got caught with it, I think it was like a ticket. It was a civil offense. It was not a criminal offense. Legalization is actually the act of creating a regulatory system. So deciding what are the licensing requirements for somebody to commercially cultivate, process, manufacture, or sell certain substances. Cannabis is legal in California now, right? So you can go to the store, you have a license to be a retailer, you have a license to be a manufacturer, a cultivator. Psychedelics is going through a decriminalization, which is basically what I said before, right? So this idea that you can possess a small amount, you can use it for personal use, and now you're starting to see laws pop up in places like Oregon and Colorado that are moving a little bit beyond decriminalization. They're saying, okay, look, these are decriminalized, but we're also creating legal environments for their use in a commercial manner. In Oregon, it's about therapeutic use, right? So people that are licensed therapists that can offer access to these substances through licensed therapy programs. Colorado's is a little broader. It has therapeutic access, but it also has what we refer to as social sharing. So the idea that people can get together, that they can share a certain amount of these substances, they can grow them themselves, they can share them with others, but it's still not full-on legalization. Now, according to the federal government, none of this is okay because all of these are Schedule I drugs, which means they have no medical benefit, a high potential for abuse, and are too dangerous to use even under a doctor's care. So it's a huge patchwork of access. People are questioning whether legalization is the right pathway for psychedelics because we live in a capitalist society, in case y'all haven't noticed, and with legalization comes capitalism, which means you have large companies that want to make money, they want licenses, they want to corner the market. With cannabis, in some states, they lobby against the right to cultivate your own, like in the state of Washington. So there's a lot of pitfalls that come with actually creating a commercial license system for the dissemination of these plants. On the other hand, as was mentioned, we want good dosing, right? We don't want 5X, 5 skull and crossbones, like it used to be in cannabis. We want to know what we're getting. We want to know that what we're getting is safe. We want to know that it's been tested. We want to know that the people growing it aren't using pesticides and things that they're not supposed to be using on it. And all of this doesn't come from decriminalization, unfortunately. It comes from legalization. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. I think decriminalization is a great place to start with psychedelics because psychedelics are not like cannabis. Your heavy cannabis consumers are consuming 4, 5, 6 times a day, every single day. With psychedelics, we don't see consumption on that scale, save for microdosing.
You haven't seen my friends.
I've heard about your friends, even through urban legend, I've heard. So I think it's a question we need to ask ourselves, right? We want to be able to grow these plants. We want to be able to use them. We don't want to go to jail for that. We want what we're using to be safe. We want to know what's in it. We want to be able to dose ourselves properly. But we also don't want Unilever and Kellogg to own the entire realm of plant medicine. So it's tough, and I don't have any answers if you're looking for answers. But these are the things we should be thinking about as some of these initiatives move forward. There is a decrim bill being pushed at the state level in California right now by Senator Scott Wiener that would decriminalize all plants. Last year it had LSD and MDMA included. They hustled him to get those out for this year's bill, but it would decriminalize at the state level. So that's just kind of a crash course. Later on, y'all can have debate about which is a better way to go.
So I think we're going to wrap it up. Do we have time for a couple of questions from the audience, or we're good? Yeah. So, folks, if you have any questions, let's get one mic over to Chris.
Okay,
And
we're going to make this
please,
happen.
We'll do 2 or 3.
Excuse me, folks.
Good.
Pardon me. If I
and if you
step
want
on
to
your
direct it
expensive
toward
outfit.
a specific speaker,
Question,
let us
yes,
know.
here we are. Question over here.
With so much energy being put into both decriminalization movements and legalization movements, why are we not centering and hearing simultaneous de-incarceration movements?
So that's a great question. Can I answer that? Yeah. So a lot of times that doesn't come with decriminalization because it's still not legal. And so a lot of times in order to have things like expungements and to have things like people being able to be released from jail who are in there for things that are no longer crimes, you have to go full legalization because a lot of times what they're in there for is not simple possession. It's sales, it's manufacturing, and those things remain illegal under decriminalization. So social justice is a huge cornerstone of the cannabis legalization movement. And it's actually what pushed a lot of legalization initiatives forward was the recognition of the impact that the war on drugs have had on certain communities. Psychedelics is a little bit different. We haven't seen as many people go to jail for psychedelics. We don't see the same social justice intensity with psychedelics that we did with cannabis. So it's still there, it's still an important piece, but it's not something that's going to happen with decrim. It's something that's going to happen with full legalization.
That's
Great question.
I have a question all the way here in the back.
All the way in the back.
Yep.
Lanny, Lanny, I'm back here. Do you know somebody who'll come to my house? I live in Goleta. Can I grow cacti, mescaline, peyote? And how long will it take to harvest?
Can you grow cacti in your yard?
In Goleta.
Yes, you can definitely grow. Oh, this mic works great.
Yeah.
You can definitely grow cacti. Peyote takes a very long time to grow.
Wachuma.
Very long time. But Wachuma, San Pedro, it grows pretty quick. Oh, you said, will I come to your
get you
house?
some
Is that
pups.
what you said?
Yeah, we can find some pups for you. And Wachuma is pretty amazing. I know several city governments that grow it, probably unknowingly in different
Yeah,
parks.
we'll see if District 216 can hook you up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have a cactus pup trade.
I have another question in the back
Yep,
to
go
your
ahead.
right. I'm going to pass this off here.
Sorry, I do have stage fright. So I work recently for Dr. Reiman Drodes, who is very much a part of this community, and he's administering ketamine now to this community, and I very much back it. I've been trying to express how great I believe this medicine can be for people. I understand plant medicine. Talking to different generations, different belief systems, different people. I'm from Wisconsin. People from Wisconsin don't understand this stuff at all. I moved to California because I felt like I didn't belong in Wisconsin because I just understood something else. And so I moved to California. As a person, I don't like saying salesperson, but I am trying to help bridge the gap between people who aren't exposed to the spiritual world, to the healing world, how they can feel connected to this. How would you guys say, as a salesperson, in an elevator pitch, how great this all could be? Because a lot of people just don't understand it.
So you want us to give an elevator pitch for the spirituality of psychedelics?
Of people of Wisconsin.
Is that what,
of
how many? That's going to be a long elevator ride. We need about 40 floors.
Yeah.
I think we can take a run at it though. And ketamine. We're talking a lot about plant medicine today, and herbal medicine, and natural medicine, and synthetics. Ketamine, LSD, DMT, 5-MeO DMT. sarsaparilla, salvia. We could talk about a lot of different compounds and molecules. And I think really some of what you heard from Amanda and the other folks today is it's a very personalized experience, right? Like what I get out of ketamine or ketamine experiences being disassociative and maybe being able to talk about difficult topics is very different than somebody else's experience. And so it's really personalized medicine at a very core level, right? Like your own DNA, your own past experience, and who you have facilitating with it. We haven't talked much about set and setting because we haven't been talking so much about consumption, a little bit about safe access and dosage. So the whole idea of set, right? What's your intention for using this? If I'm going to a festival all day and I take more than a microdose of mushrooms, that's probably a little different than a massive, amount of mushrooms and an intentional medicine ceremony. So how you use it, where you use it, maybe talk a little bit about what can happen, or the elevator pitch for the
I
spirituality.
heard an elevator pitch at one of these psychedelic conferences. It was a ketamine booth, and I couldn't believe it. The woman was so nice and sweet, and so she described ketamine, and she's like, most people think it's a horse tranquilizer, but actually it was created by the CIA for use in soldiers in Vietnam, so they could disassociate and not know that they're surrounded by enemy forces. And also, molecularly, it's quite similar to PCP. I was like, is this the sales pitch?
Sign me up.
Was Sidney Gottlieb involved with the CIA at ketamine?
This was the first I was. That was the first I was hearing of it. But anyways, that's how I would not pitch it.
I would not pitch it that way either. Amanda?
Well, just I guess coming from a social work perspective, we start where people are at. And so, I'm from Chicago. I got in trouble for weed in Waukesha County, Wisconsin, so I'm right there. So I think it's understanding that they're not going to be ready for this, what he just said, right? And they're going to be looking for things that are in the form that they recognize, which might be a pill, it might be a tincture. This is what they feel is medicine. You're not going to change their mind, especially not in an elevator pitch, that medicine can come in many different forms. So I think it's about recognizing that we all hold trauma in our bodies, and these are different ways to deal with it. And there's a lot of different ways to deal with it. You can deal with it or you can mask it. And that unlike some medicines that come from the pharmaceutical industry, these plant medicines help us work through the trauma rather than just mask it. And I feel like that's a very universal concept that no matter where you're from, you will resonate with.
Thank you.
So I think we have time for one more
question.
One more question. Anybody?
Anybody?
Okay, across. All right, I'm going across.
right.
Pardon me. Excuse me. I don't want to ruin your pants. I can't afford it. Excuse me. Pardon me. Here we go. Hold on. Over here. Okay. Over here. All right. Ready? This is the last question.
I'm ready. Okay, so I'm just wondering, is it still plant medicine if it's synthetic?
If it's biosynthetic,
Yeah.
It's organic
does
chemistry.
Does it curate the same experience?
that's a great question. So natural source versus synthetic source, will you have the same experience? Or why might it be different?
Almost all medicine, made by pharmaceutical companies is mimicking nature. If you have a headache, you don't go and chew on willow bark. You pop an aspirin, and so one of the ways that I handle that objection of synthetic is Albert Hoffman. He created LSD and
Bicycle Day 419.
brought some psilocybin down to Maria Sabina down in the 1950s. She was famous for giving mushrooms to white people in Mexico. Anyways, when she took the synthetic, she said that this really contains the spirit of the mushroom and that we could use this, when we were out of mushrooms for ceremony.
That's one perspective. You would get a lot of different answers. I don't know if, Lanny, you want to talk about a natural source versus a synthetic source?
Yeah, well, again, I kind of lean toward the what Amanda called the entourage effect of a whole plant, the synergy of all the compounds in a plant in their natural state. We assume that we isolate the active ingredient that we think is the one that's doing the work, but we don't know enough yet. We haven't been studying this enough to know how important all the other compounds are in synergy with that active ingredient. So yes, I think it's possible to create a synthetic, especially if it's just not practical for someone to be able to find or ingest a natural product. But I would always vote for the natural product first.
Thank you. So I'm going to answer the question I asked earlier about the one thing I'd love you to go home with, and it's really just gratitude. The opportunity to come to an environment like this and have these conversations is not available to all the humans on this planet. There's billions. And, to have folks like this sharing their knowledge and wisdom, for you to have fellowship and conversations with other people that are values aligned or at least curious. So just take some gratitude home with you, and thank you guys so much for coming tonight.